This episode is proudly supported by Montague, handpicked for you.
So the eating experience of our plums is sweet. That's a primary driver. It's got to be sweet, but it's also got to have enough acid, because the mix of acid and sugar is what gives fruit its flavour. And in a plum, it tends to be slightly higher acidity. And then a really nice, full, not dry, but juicy explosion of juice into your mouth as you bite into it. That's nirvana for us in terms of plum.
For more information, go to montague.com.au.
And a tuna will slowly fill out in fatness all the way back to the tail. We used to call them footballs because they got really, really fat and really round. And when they got to that stage, the other ones that really got the high price over in Japan.
This is Fishtales, a seafood podcast. I'm John Susman.
In our last episode, we heard how growing up as a fifth-generation fisherman in Port Lincoln shaped the life of the young Andy Puglisi. It was the early 1990s when Port Lincoln and the Australian seafood industry was changed forever, and the Puglisi family were at the forefront of this change. The tuna ranching industry in Port Lincoln started in the early 1990s as an experimental venture. At the time, the fishing industry was facing a decline due to overfishing and a depletion of wild stocks, leading fishermen to look for alternative sources of income. Tuna ranching offered a solution. It involved the wild catching and rearing of tuna in pens at sea, allowing for a controlled and sustainable supply of fish. In 1991, a pilot project was established in Port Lincoln to test the viability of this industry. The project was a collaboration between the South Australian Government, the local fishing industry, including the Puglisis, and researchers from Flinders University. The first ranch was set up in Boston Bay and consisted of a series of large pens where young tuna caught in the wild were raised. The project was successful and the tuna grew rapidly, reaching maturity within a few months. The success of the Port Lincoln project led to the expansion of the industry, and by the mid-1990s, several companies had set up tuna ranches in Port Lincoln, providing employment for the local fishing community. The industry continued to grow, and Port Lincoln became known as the tuna capital of the world. Andy Puglisi, under the watchful eye of his father Bob, was part of this pioneering and amazing industry.
You know, the tuna fishery in Australia was a wild catch poling fish that they would put into cans, and that was definitely a boom and bust style of fishery, and but very much hard. It was virtually impossible to manage like we have with the Spencer Gulf prawn. It's a migratory fish that goes around the world, and one of the fishermen over there, a guy called Dinko Luke, and at the time they were catching the better quality fish, putting them direct onto the tuna reefer vessels from Japan, and they would pick out the best quality fish. They would ikijimi them and freeze them down and take them direct to Japan from there. And they were getting paid a higher price for that fish. And Dinko just thought, well, what happens if we catch that fish, we feed it up, and put it in a pen and let it swim around in circles, and we'll feed it, get it fat, and then send it to the market. Which, at the time, he recognised that they were buying that tuna because it was a higher fat content. That they were paying more for the higher fat content product, and that's what you'll see on the east coast here. You'll get a nice big fat bluefin that's just been out of the been eating well. It'll have a higher fat content, and we'll get a lot more for that product when it hits the skidgy market in Japan. It's not skidgy anymore, is it? It's another no. Yeah, the market floor in Japan. So they came up with the idea: let's per se in the fish, put them into a cage, tow that cage back to Port Lincoln, and we'll feed them what they normally eat, them pilchards and sardines and herring and mackerel and anchovies, and fatten that fish up. And in a short space of time, from February through to the end of April, May, they'll almost double in. They'll add 50% of their weight on, so they'll come in at about 20 kilo, 18 quick kilo at the time, and they can. The average weight of some of those fish was going out at 26 to 30 kilo average for the whole cage. My father was part of, got in on that bandwagon, and we started setting up in a small way to farm tuna, and we did that from 91 through to 2003.
The implementation of tuna ranching in Port Lincoln was a highly innovative and creative solution to the challenges faced by the fishing industry. Port Lincoln was one of the first places in the world to experiment with this new method, which involved rethinking traditional fishing methods and using technology and knowledge to create a new industry. The success of the pilot project helped establish the viability of tuna ranching, which became a major contributor to the local economy and a sustainable source of income for the fishing community.
Well, so they'll go and catch the fish at sea, which can happen anything up to 200 miles from Port Lincoln. We'll tow a 40 to 50 metre cage, which is 20 metres deep. They'll tow that out to sea, and basically in the vicinity of where the tuna persona is and where the fish actually are. There's an art form in just being in the right place for that one. Yeah, well, they've got planes that fly around up there, and they can see that fish, and then they'll communicate back to the persona and the fisherman to say, the fish are over here. They'll circle around it, and the persona will race over there. They'll send a chum boat over, and they'll feed the fish. Chuck some live bait in the water to keep them on the surface, and the persona will run the net around them, purse it up, and hold them in the net. They changed the shape of the net so it was the bag of the net was quite big and open, so the fish will stay. They'll have space to swim around in. Typically, a per se net will be quite shallow in the bag, and so they can scoop the fish out and get the fish onto the boat, pump the fish on the boat that way. So they'll keep the net open. They'll tow the tow cage across, which sounds, they'll just tow it across there, but the actual the tow cage at this stage tows at about 1.5, 2 knots at best when they go on flat stick. So once the fish are in the cage, they can only tow at about 1 to 1.2 knots an hour. So yeah, there's an art form in actually filling the cage. And they'll join the two nets together. They'll tow the tuna pen to alongside the persona net and alongside the big persona, and they'll tie it all together. They'll have a window cut in the side of the net. That's a special net there, a special opening that's underneath the water. They'll join the two nets together, shallow up the persona net, and force the fish to swim through the hole, which is about 4 metres each, 4 by 4. It's quite a big hole in a net when you look at it. And they'll swim through there, and then they're captured. And once they've got about in the 40 metre cages, we used to put about 9,000 pieces, I reckon, back in the day. And now they've got 45 metre cages, and I think they put 14 to 16,000 pieces in one of those cages. It's quite interesting. You make it 5 metres bigger in diameter and almost double the size of the water in the cage, so they're able to fit a lot more in there. And then they'll slowly tow that home. Back in the day, we were out on 130 latitude, longitude 130, 131. So it was a 240 mile tow home, which would take us. That was a good 2 weeks to do that. It took a long time, getting the piss belted out of you with the different changes that come through. And if it got wild, like the 30 or 40 knots, mate, they just turn off the engine and just hang it, using the cage as a drag, and big waves would crash over the boat, fill the back deck full of water.
Fattening a tuna before selling it in Japan improved its value because the fatty flesh of the tuna was highly prized by the Japanese buyers. The most valuable cuts of tuna in Japan are those rich in fat, such as the toro, the otoro, and the chutoro. This is because the increased fat content imparts a rich, deep flavour and a more tender texture to the meat, which is highly prized by the Japanese seafood connoisseur. The fattening process involves feeding the tuna a diet high in energy-rich ingredients to build a substantial layer of fat in its flesh. This enhanced the quality of the fish and contributed to the overall success of Port Lincoln tuna in Japan.
Anyway, they'll tow that cage home, and then with 9,000, well, back then 9,000 pieces for our operation, and we would split that up into 3 to 3.5 cages. We would fill 3.5 cages up with that tow it alongside, put about 2,500, 3,000 pieces into a 40-metre ring, and count them as they were, with cameras and all that sort of stuff, count them through and take an average weight of that fish in that net, so they would times the amount of fish going through by that average weight to give you your total number of fish that you've caught, and that would come off your quota. And you'd fatten it up over the next 3 to 4 months And I just remember watching those fish when they first come in. They were really skinny and they were really hungry, So they'd throw some shovelfuls of pilchards into the water there, which they'd thawed out before they'd put it in there because they come in frozen blocks. Throw the fish in, and the water would foam, it was just, they were savage. For the first month or so, you'd never get in the water, they'd bloody eat you alive. Mate of mine jumped in the water one day because it was really hot and glassy day, and they threw a heap of fish next to him. Heap of pilchards next to him, and then one of the tuna decided that his big toe was a pilchard, bit his big toe, let it go, but it looked like someone had got razor blades and stripped the bottom and top of his toes and couldn't walk very good for a couple of weeks after. But that was and then you'd fatten them up, and then in the end, you'd go out and you'd throw a pilchard out there, throw pilchards in the water, and by this stage the fish you can see they're starting to get quite fat, and a tuna will slowly fill out and in fatness all the way back to the tail, and when they get to, we used to call them footballs because they got really, really fat and really round, and when they got to that stage, that's what the other ones that really got the high price over in Japan. So, but you'd throw the fish, you'd throw some bait in the water for the fish to eat, and you'd see them swim past, and they're they're not racing anymore because they're nice and full. And they'd grab a pilchard and they'd hold it in their mouth and swim a little bit, and then they'd let it go because they didn't feel like that one, and another one would come and eat it. So that was fine, but yeah, it was pretty amazing how they'd gone from full racing machines to racehorses or really fast Ferraris, because when they put their speed on, they go really quick, and it was really cool to watch.
Ikejima is a critical step in the process of harvesting and processing tuna that is essential for preserving the quality of the fish. By quickly and precisely killing the fish and preventing the build-up of lactic acid and spoilage due to microorganisms, the Ikejima process helps to produce a high-quality flesh that is highly prized.
Once you get to, we would always try out the market early in the piece. We'd go out and catch, 40 to 100 pieces of fish. We would and send that to market, and gill and gut it. You'd gill and gut the fish. You would bleed it. You would catch it in the net. We'd do a little purseine shot inside the pen. We would purse that up. A diver would go in, grab the fish by the gills and put it onto a chute that we would take it up onto the boat with that chute. It would get up onto the killing table where they would stab the fish just underneath the side fins. And then they would apple core out the soft spot then take out the brain. And that would also expose the spinal cord. We would pass a thin piece of stainless steel wire down the spinal cord to kill the nervous system. Because if you didn't do that right, those nerves kept operating or sending signals to the meat, to the fish, and what would happen then is it would burn the flesh and give it a bit of flavour, and the Japanese wouldn't pay very good money for that. So if you killed it quickly, bled it well, and took the brain out and killed the spinal cord, you would get the best quality fish and get the best price in the Japanese market. One of my roles on the harvest was to gill and gut the tuna. I wasn't really good compared to the Japanese dudes or the Korean dudes that they would get in to do the job, but I had a go at it for a while, and it's quite interesting and sort of set me up for a love of a really good knife and a really sharp knife. I still got all my fingers, which is pretty handy. I wasn't that crazy with a knife over my time. And then that fish would go into an ice slurry and get the core temperature of the fish down quite quickly as we can. That would sit there. So in the early days, we used to keep them overnight and then send them out the next day. And but they would set and then they would be air freighted through to the Japanese market, where it would go. They would be graded when they got cleaned and dressed to go to market. And the Japanese buyers would have their representatives there who would look at the colour of the flesh, and they would assign each fish to a market that it would suit that colour of the flesh. And then it would catch it would be trucked to Adelaide overnight, or even to Sydney sometimes, and then that's 2 days of travel through to Sydney, 1 day overnight to Adelaide. And then it would be air freighted through to Narita Airport and distributed out to the different fish markets to be sold that day or the following day. And like back in those days, we were averaging around 3,000 yen per kilo, which was around $50 a kilo for the fish, which was fantastic when you look at what they used to get for the fish back in the tuna canning days. And the fisherman would get was getting around $1 a kilo for a canned fish, and for a lot more work and a lot more value adding, they ended up getting $50 a kilo for the fish. That's come back a long way now, but it's still, with efficiencies and volumes and all that sort of stuff, the fishermen now are making a good profit out of it.
A visit to the Skidgee Fish Market would be a truly memorable experience for a young country boy, providing an unparalleled window into the world of Japanese seafood culture and an opportunity to experience the sights, sounds and tastes of one of the world's most vibrant and dynamic food markets.
One of the great experiences of my life was to go through to back then the market in Tokyo was the Skidgee market, and that was just an amazing place. You go in there and they had like 10,000 different stalls. Like the individual buyers with all different types of fish. Like the stuff that we used to push over the side on the prawn trawl, little tiny flatheads, all these smelly, stinky little shitty things that you never think twice about it. Mate, they were selling it there at that market. There was seaweed with fish eggs on the outside, and they were selling that. It was the most diverse sort of things that you could think of, eels, and then one of the things that just blew me away was going there and I'd sit there watching a guy filleting a box of live eels. Now these things are live. He'd put a wriggling all around the place. He would flatten it out, take off a fillet off one side, cut out the backbone, and then trim up the two fillets that were butterfly fillets like you do a garfish over here, cut the head off, put it down, and that's about as long as it took. It was just amazing. I sat there just checking that out. I was there for about 20 minutes going, check this guy out, this is amazing. And then my chaperone at the time was the guy, was Inagaki from Maruha. I'm not sure if he still works for him. This is 22 years ago now. I think he's moved on to another tuna company. But Inagaki he lost me. He's going, what? And then he come back to where I was. What are you doing? I said, far out. You should see this guy fillet these live eels. And he's going, oh, for God's sake, come on. Dragged me away. Couldn't believe I wasted all that time looking at a guy doing that. Well, you'd go across the other side of the market and there was this cube of whale and whale meat, and like the darkest, reddest meat you've ever seen. It was like a cube. It was about, a foot by a foot square, a foot by 12 inches, just sitting on this block. I remember it like it was yesterday, and that was $100 a kilo for that whale meat, and you can understand why it's so highly prized, and. But at the end of the day, like you go across and we were there to see the tuna being sold. So you'd go over there, and there was 5 different at that market. There was 5 different auction houses there. The Maruha one. There was a couple of others. I can't remember all their names, and that was always cool to watch too, because you'd see the guy up there, and one of them, they'd get a dance on, and they'd stand over the top of the fish and on a little box, and everybody be watching him, all the buyers, and they're all smoking durries with a light that they'd look at the fish with it, and he'd start, and you'd see each auctioneer would have a different action. Some were nice and cool and smooth, and one of them he'd be jumping up and down and barking like a dog, I don't know what the bloody hell he was saying, but all the Japanese guys were in him. They all knew it easy. They all had it, and they're all fucking bidding and cursing and carrying on. And then your fish would come up, and it was really cool to see the fish caught, fed, harvested, processed, and cleaned and packed for market, and then see it in the market to get your $50 to $60 a kilo for that fish. It was a real experience, something I'll never forget.
Dining in Japan can be a truly unforgettable experience for anyone who's never been there. With a rich culinary tradition, a focus on using the best ingredients, and a commitment to presentation and service, it's no wonder that Japanese cuisine is considered by many to be amongst the best in the world. For a young bloke from Port Lincoln, it was life-changing.
Oh, but some of the amazing things, like it's the same with travel anywhere in the world. If you dig it out and you find really great places to eat, it's always an amazing experience. But going to Japan, there's institutions that you go to. There's a sushi place in Japan that, if you're lucky enough to get there at the right time, so you don't have to wait in line, because it always has a massive long line. And you get the freshest fish that comes there, the freshest fish that's just come off the market floor that morning. And it is an institution. Everybody who's anybody has been to that sushi place in Skidgey Market. And I haven't been there for so long. I don't know if it's moved on to the new market, but that was always just the most perfect sushi that you could ever think of. A couple of pieces of sashimi on the side, and always, there were some of the most amazing meals that I remember going. The boys from Maruha took me to a tempura place, and in Ginza, the Ginza suburb or prefecture, whatever it's called, and. I was, they asked me, what do you eat? And I said, is there anything you don't eat? And I said, mate, you bring it out, I'll have a go at it, So if you actually have a look at my body shape, you'll understand what I'm trying to say. And they had a little aquarium up the end of the bar, and the perfect part about it is if you get up on the bar, you got all the action happening in front of you. The guy who's the tempura master, he was, there was no temperature gauge on the big vat. There was a vat probably about a metre around in diameter of beautiful oil. And he would flick a little tiny bit of the tempura in there, and then how that was bubbling was how hot it needed to be, and then he would put these fish in there. And, you're sitting there, don't understand a word of Japanese, and the guy's there, and they would order something, and I wouldn't understand what it was. And next minute, the guy's going over there, and he, with a little net, he would get, there was a little school of horse mackerel chows that we would, in South Australia, we used to catch plenty of them, and mate, they were horrible things, mate. The Japanese loved them, so he would fish one of those out and tempura that up for us, and that was really a great experience. And then there was an abalone, little black lip abalone on the side of the thing, and he'd take that off, and he'd say, "Oh God, someone's having abalone," and I've never seen this before, never eaten it like that again. He'd cleaned it up in front of us, put it into the tempura, cooked it into the tempura and in the oil, brought it out, sliced it up, and it was like butter. Man, I've tried to do that 100 times since, and it always turned out sort of like the texture of the sole of my shoe. So, but and then there was also a couple of little tiny little snappers about 8 inches long. They were swimming up and down in the aquarium, patrolling away, and then one of them got fished out. And I'm going, oh, someone's someone's having snapper, not realising it was us. And this guy whipped a fillet off the live snapper, sliced it up into some sashimi, served it up in front of us. The other half of the fish was still alive. The greenies out there at the moment are probably rolling over if they listen to this story. Will piss their pants. But that it was an experience like you never have before, and that's the beauty of Japan. You go to they have sushi houses there, restaurants there that of a quality like you'll never experience anywhere else. Regardless of what people try to tell you how good they actually are outside of Japan, you won't see that what you get. Some of those experiences I've had over there.
Fishermen are often referred to as opportunistic hunters because they're always looking for the best opportunities to maximise their yields and profits in time at sea. This often means that they will shift from one fishery to the next as conditions and market demands change. The tuna ranching industry experienced a boom and bust cycle in the late 20th and early 21st centuries. The Puglisi family made a wise and astute call to exit the industry at the top of its value and turned their focus to a new and emerging world of mussel farming.
So in 2003, it was sort of the fishery come to the industry come to a sort of crossroads. We were as a company, a very small company. We didn't do a lot of volume back then. We would do about 300 tonne of tuna a year. In once it was fattened up and grown out, 250 to 300 tonne. We didn't, and it was at a stage there where, if we're going to stay in this, we're either going to get big or get out. And the smart thing to do at the time was to get out. We were bought out by one of the other large tuna companies, and they bought out. We were lucky enough to sell out at the peak of the market, and that. It was something I didn't want to do. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was an amazing fishery and most dynamic fishery in Australia. With the highest turnover, prestige and all that sort of stuff was all in amongst it all. And I didn't want to get out of it. But my old man he saw the writing on the wall and said, right, it's time to go. So we sold out of that, and it was, as it turned out, there's a lot. Since then, the industry's really changed, and they've been through some quite hard times, where the rest of the world came and had a look at how the the South Australian guys had created this amazing quality product and adopted that into the Mediterranean and also in Mexico. And they also do a certain amount of it in Japan itself. So that has really watered down the high prices that our guys were getting over in the market as well. So we were lucky enough to get out at the top end, and they've had some really hard times since. And but now they've turned it around and doing quite well. It is a really great fish. It's a beautiful fish, and like one of the most amazing things is getting in the water with a tuna. The colours of that fish are just amazing, and part of what we did back in the day with the Regional Development Board, and something that John has helped us out with a lot, was to have a chef's tour and bringing a wholesaler in from each of the capital cities of Australia, and bringing in 3 or 4 of the best chefs that they had in that each of those towns, each of those cities, and then show them what Port Lincoln's actually got. This is probably another story. It should be in another part of the interview, but I'll jump ahead a little bit. And they get to see the mussels, the oysters, the kingfish, have a look at the tuna, have a look at the abalone industry, and one of those real experiences to go out and see a tuna harvest when they're happening, and get some of those opinion makers, the Marty Bowettses, the Neil Perrys, the Manus, they've all, and Colin Fashionages, they've all been across and had a look, and jump in the water with the tuna, have a look at the fish swimming past, and you sit there going, oh, it's dangerous. They do swim fast. They can swim at 24 knots an hour all day, every day. They're just the most amazing. They're a real racehorse of the sea. And you see them coming towards you, and you think they're going to smash into you and hurt you. That doesn't matter what you do. When you're in the water, we're such a Gumby in the water. You try and put your hand out to touch him. They always keep away from you. It's a real experience, and the colours of that fish, I'll never forget that as well.
In our next episode, we'll hear how Pugs put down his tuna gear and transitioned into his 3rd career in the seafood industry.
This is Fishtales, a seafood podcast. A Deep in the Weeds production. I'm John Susman. Follow us on Instagram at Fishtales Seafood Podcast, or email us at fishtalespodcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay tuned for more tales from beneath the surface of the seafood world every Friday on your podcast app.